Um, Certainly, as you've pointed out, children are agents of change, and we do want to be more engaged in political change and have the political will. And there's a kind of a new wave of energy now in order to realize that. So I think we're all excited to be part of that. Dr. Bhutta, many of you may know him, and he'll be coming on Sunday, so you'll get to meet him on Sunday. So this is great. He got not delayed, but kind of cross-drafted in Tanzania. He's the founding director of the Center of Excellence in Women and Child Health at the Aga Khan University and the Robert Harding Inaugural Chair in Global Child Health at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. He also holds adjunct professorships at several leading universities, including the Bloomberg School of Public Health at Johns Hopkins, the Harvard T.H. Chan School of Public Health, Tufts University, University of Alberta, and the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. He's one of 7 members of the independent expert review group set up by the UN Secretary General from 2011 to 2015 for monitoring the global progress in maternal child health of the Millennial Development Goals, the MDGs. And he served on many World Health committees and with the Global Alliance for Vaccine Initiatives, etc. He's certainly a wonderful and approachable person despite his impressive CV. I encourage everybody to speak to him on Sunday. And he's going to be making a tape presentation for today. And I'll cut him off. I'll give him his 3-minute warning, Mark.
So, ladies and gentlemen, may I offer my apologies for not being with you today, mainly because I have to be in Tanzania for the Global Vaccine Alliance Program and Policy Committee meeting. Of the few thoughts that I wanted to share with you as part of your PEGASUS conference was firstly the whole issue of how during the period of the Millennium Goals we have focused on addressing not only some of the direct determinants of child health and adverse outcomes, but also some of the underlying social determinants, and whether or not we succeeded or failed in that endeavor. So perhaps the most important and illustrative feature around some of the global disparities was the distribution of child mortality. As we tried to do over 13 years ago as part of the Bellagio Child Survival Series, was to give a sense of the global distribution of the burden of child mortality. And this graphic that you may be able to see is a map that shows the distribution of 10 million child deaths worldwide in the year 2000. Each one of these dots that you see represents a cluster of 10,000 deaths in our estimation. And as we could tell at that time, these largely represented deaths in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. South Asia, because of its population density, largely appeared as a blob. Now, we've made tremendous progress over this period of time in terms of reducing child mortality. So today, as many of you might know, from that figure of 10 million deaths under 5, we are down to an estimated 6 million deaths, 5.9 to be exact. And that's no mean achievement. That's one of the fastest rates of reduction in child mortality in the history of mankind within a short period of time. And it's been largely possible because of global advocacy, because of focused attention in countries, particularly the large countries, the Brazils of the world, China, in terms of concerted development and reduction in the burden of preventable child deaths. Progress has also been uneven. As the Millennium Development Goals, of which the 2 main targets for mortality were Millennium Goal 4, focused on reducing child deaths by 2/3 by the year 2015 from a 1990 base, and Millennium Goal 5, which focused on a 3/4 reduction in maternal mortality by the same time period. If you look at the achievements overall in terms of reduction in mortality, not only has child mortality gone down, but also maternal mortality has shown comparable reductions. But progress hasn't been even. Within the child survival context, most of that reduction has been in post-neonatal, post-newborn mortality. And we find that rates of reduction of newborn deaths within the first 4 weeks of life has been much slower. There are also huge disparities between countries, and also a significant amount of disparity within countries. So we know around some of those inequities, certainly in the context of child health and survival, but also in the context of many of the social determinants of adverse outcomes. Now, what do I mean by social determinants? I mean, these are the living conditions that all of us are exposed to. And in the context of child health and survival, the social determinants that we believe have strongly influenced outcomes relate to poverty, particularly the kind of poverty that leads to marginalization of populations on the basis of ethnicity, gender, geography, access to services, and also perhaps a sense of fatalism around the way people live and the way they access care. One social determinant that I do want to mention is undernutrition. And as many of you know, if you were to plot a distribution of undernutrition worldwide, whether it be for mothers, as shown in this particular slide, around maternal anemia distribution, or for distribution of fetal malnutrition and babies born small for gestational age, as shown in this particular slide, you'll find that the distribution is comparable to the same geographies that you see the clustering of child mortality in. And it's partly because of these underlying factors that we see them impacting child survival to a large extent. So it is our estimation that maternal and fetal malnutrition and child malnutrition underlies about 45% of the total burden of under 5 mortality across the world. And this has been one of the reasons why the needle has shifted relatively slowly, because during the Millennium Goals process, we failed to recognize the importance of undernutrition, at least in its chronic variations. There was no nutrition goal within the Millennium Development Goals per se. The one goal or target around undernutrition was buried under Goal 1 of poverty reduction, and as a result, it did not get enough traction during that period compared to the current scenario, where we are not only aware of the importance of these underlying social determinants, but have moved as a global collective towards addressing these much more concertedly and in a much more focused manner over the next 15 years. And I'm, of course, referring to the Sustainable Development Goals. The Sustainable Development Goals, all 17 of them, that have been approved and signed off by countries last September, are daunting to many people because they are so different and so variable. They range from principally a focus on the globe, climate change, to narrow focused initiatives around reducing preventable deaths in women and children and newborns. But they are wonderful because they also are interconnected, and they talk to each other in terms of various aspects influencing not only health outcomes but development outcomes. So education is in there, poverty alleviation is there, and elimination of severe poverty or extreme poverty is part of the Sustainable Development Goals. For the first time, we have a nutrition goal, which is a goal of eliminating hunger and addressing food insecurity and reducing the burden of recognizable, preventable child and maternal malnutrition. We also have the health goals, which not only focus on the narrow mortality reduction, which is a continuation of the Millennium Goals, but also bring in for the first time non-communicable diseases and things that affect various continuum of age groups. They also relate to things that need to be done around implementation. So a principal undercurrent and focus of the Sustainable Development Goals are equitable access and care. So universal health care, provision of services to populations that reach those in greatest need, is a very important component of the Sustainable Development Goals framework. They have gender, they also have living conditions, environment, water, sanitation, hygiene. So in other words, the Sustainable Development Goals are a nirvana for people who talk about how in an interconnected world, we just can't influence health and health outcomes from within the health sector alone. So if you really want to influence child mortality and survival, you have to focus on both empowerment of their mothers, you have to focus on educating the families, you have to focus on provision of care to the extent that the next generation of mothers, young girls, can be supported, gender differentials can be reduced, and people provided the living conditions and living environment that they can bring up their children and families in. And for the first time in the Sustainable Development Goals that we have in front of us, there is a focus on moving from survival to thrival, to improving health outcomes, but also child development outcomes, which are extremely important in terms of addressing these long-term issues. So I could go on this for a very long time, but I think the important focus that remains are how are we going to implement the Sustainable Development Goals. And that's a subject for a much larger discussion, but suffice it to say that SDGs are there for us to look at implementation research in a much more integrated framework. And many of the learnings that will take place around how to achieve this will require multidisciplinary approaches, will require teams working together, will require collaborations between institutions, the North and the South, and in terms of bringing on the collective wisdom of all of us to ensure that the world that has so many differences also has so many commonalities that not divide us but unite us. Thank you very much for your support and attention, and I'm once again very sorry that I could not be with you in person, at least today, but I hope to join you in your Congress on Sunday.